Good morning, good afternoon. I'm going to model how to take this lesson that was created in PowerPoint format for an in-class instruction and to flip it to be a digital distant learning format. One way you can do this is by using Screencastify, which is what I'm using now. I'm actually using an unlimited account where I pay for the year. It's like $59 for the year, but Screencastify does give 5-minute free recordings. And so you can do it in segments of 5 minutes, which means you can record slide to slide or do a couple slides together within those 5 minutes, and then give a pre recorded lesson that students can access at any time. So I will go through this lesson to model what this could look like for you. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, students. The first thing I want for you to do is to analyze this map, and you can give this to students in a format where the map is the whole PowerPoint. The students can download it to have their own copy. So you can make a forced copy of it. And then that way students can actually write in the PowerPoint that they receive, or you can put the responses inside of a Google Classroom. And so the students can respond to the questions within a Google Classroom assignment, so they can respond to each question, so you can get the feedback for each question. So I could instruct the students. I don't have a Google Classroom because I don't have students, but let's say I have students and I say, I want you to access your Google Classroom form for today's lesson and complete the questions in those sections as we go through them. So the first thing I want for you to do is to find the Do Now in your Google Classroom section of your lesson. And I want you to respond to these following questions. The first thing I want you to do is to identify Virginia and what region is it located in. This is a map skill, so I'm not going to tell you what to do up front. I want to see if you have the skill to do so. The second thing I want you to do is to identify what other colonies are in that region. And then the third thing I want you to do is to tell me, where are the English colonies located? If these are all the English colonies, looking at this map geographically, give that geography a name. Go ahead and pause the video at this time and complete that section of your Google Classroom form. Give them about 5 minutes. You can set a timer, or you can have them say 5 minutes to get it done. They shouldn't need longer than that. Then you come back and say, okay, so what is it that you found? So first of all, how do you know what the regions are? According to this map, you should have found the legend. This is a legend that tells us that we have the New England, Middle, and Southern colonies, as you can see here. This is the current geographical boundary where you can see the gray lines. And then you have current state boundaries where you can see the white lines. And you have a proclamation line that is given right here. And this proclamation was in 1763. So we know that this is a map of at least 1763 to show the British colonies in 1763. Okay, so what region is Virginia located in? I find Virginia and I look at my legend and I know that Virginia is in the Southern colonies. What other colonies are in that region? You should be able to see that Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia are in this region. And then where are the English colonies located? If these are the English colonies, then we know that this is the Atlantic Ocean and this is a coastline. So this would be considered the Atlantic coast, or we know that this is the east side. If this is north, south, east, and west, we know that this is the east side of North America. So that would make this the eastern coast of North America. Okay, so your geography skills, you should have been able to identify the legend. You should have been able to identify the colonies in the Southern colonies. You should have been able to identify the New England, Middle, and Southern colonies along the Atlantic coastline. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want for you to do is to take a few minutes, and you'll pause the video again after getting the instructions. I want for you to read the caption and analyze the visual before you to be able to tell me everything that you know about Jamestown. In your Google Classroom, the next section has a section for Think, Write, Pair, Share, and it's an open ended response. I want for you to write everything that you know about Jamestown based on this visual and caption, and one inference that you can make about Jamestown. Go ahead and pause the video. Take your time to read and analyze what you see and make your inference at this time. Okay, thank you for your work. So let's go ahead and talk about what is it that you found. So if you read down here in the caption, we know that it's saying Jamestown. So Jamestown is the first, Jamestown, Virginia. So now we know automatically that Jamestown is in Virginia, which we know Virginia is in which colonial region? The southern region. Okay. And we know that from our map that we just did. We know that Jamestown, Virginia was the first permanent English settlement that is established in the New World. When I hear the words first permanent, it tells me that there may have been other colonies before or settlements before that simply did not last. Permanent means it lasted forever, right? So if first permanent indicates to me or implies to me, I can make an inference that this was not the first English settlement, but the first permanent or lasting English settlement in North America, established in the New World. And we know that the Europeans, based on our lessons last week and yesterday, last week's and Monday's lesson, that the New World, America was the New World to the Europeans, who had, in their sense, discovered a new territory. It was founded by the London Company in 1607 for the purposes of making profits. So now I know that it is founded by a company for economic reasons. They are coming to make money. So now I know, and I also know it's founded in 1607. So we know that dates are very important in history. So one of our TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge or Skills, tells us we have to know what happened on specific dates, and 1607 is one of those first dates. We also have to know what happened in specific events, such as colonization of America. So Jamestown is the first permanent English settlement in 1607, founded by a company for economic reasons. Okay, so now let's look at the visual. So now I can see that, one, I'm by water. This is the coastline, so I can take myself back to the map that I just saw. So I know that even though this picture is inverted in a certain way, I know that Jamestown is in Virginia. So I do know that this must be the Atlantic Ocean, right? So this will make this the Atlantic coast line. And I can see also that the Jamestown colony had a fence. So maybe this fence was significant. I can infer that maybe the colonists had conflicts. We know that there were Native Americans there based on our readings and learnings from last week. So maybe there was conflicts between the Native Americans and the Jamestown settlers, and the fence was built or designed to keep them safe, or to keep out the Native Americans. We can also see that there's lots of green, lush grass here. So wherever I see green, lush grass, I can assume that it may be good for growing maybe crops, right? And I can assume that at this point because I don't actually know. So that's an inference that I can make. I know that was in the South. Based on our readings yesterday, I know that the South had hot, humid weather. So Jamestown could be a colony that produced crops based on what I've already learned. Okay. So look at your writing and see if what you wrote is similar to the things that we just talked about or that I just said. And if it is, then great. Congratulations. You made great inferencing. You drew from the reading and you were able to articulate your thoughts accordingly. If you did not get the same thing, I want you now to go back and push space. Leave what you have there already, but add to what you already have to get correct information and to articulate it in a way that you understand it. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to take time and do that now. And remember, it's okay if you did not get it at first. We learn from our mistakes and we learn from what we don't know. So if now you know, go ahead and write it down and articulate it. Pause the video and come back when you are finished. Okay, so today you will be able to explain the significance of 1607 and explain the political, economical, geographical, and social characteristics in the settling of the Southern English colonies. So let's talk about that for a second. What does this mean? One, we see we have a date there. So we need to know, why is that date important? We just talked about Jamestown being founded or established in 1607. We will also explain the political, economical, geographical, and social characteristics in the settling of the Southern colonies. So there are certain pegs, we talked about pegs last week, that these colonies had certain attributes of. And we're going to be able to describe those things or explain those things. And then later on, we're going to apply this to compare the three different regions to one another. Okay. In your demonstration of learning, you will be answering 4 of 5 test formatted questions correctly, explaining the PEG's characteristics of the Southern colonies. And again, what are the PEGs? Exactly. Political, economical, geographical, and social characteristics. So you're going to explain those PEG's characteristics by answering test questions. You need to get 4 out of 5 of them correct. Okay. So now what you're going to do, we're going to model what you're going to do for the rest of the day, for the rest of the lesson, okay? In this I do, we're going to identify the pegs in the reading together. So I'm going to model what you're going to do. So you'll need highlight colors of yellow, green, blue, and pink. And in your forced copy, you can simply go in and use those colors. By highlighting political, economical, geographical, and social in the color that you're going to use. And then as we read, you're going to highlight those things. So my reading is actually pre-highlighted. So after I read, we'll go through, we'll talk about those things, and then I will push enter so you can see how it's highlighted so that you'll know what to do with yours. Okay. So it says, if you're looking to get rich, you should go to the Southern colonies in North America. So right now in my mind, I'm visualizing the Southern colonies I saw on that map in North America along the Atlantic coastline. There are a few things you should know, though, before you go. Women do not have any rights, and they are property of their husbands. If you do not own any land or property, you cannot vote. If you are African American or Native American, you will be enslaved. Do you still want to go? Only rich white males who owned property had the right to vote and hold a government position. A governor appointed by the king ruled the southern colonies, but the governor did allow the colonists to form colonial assemblies or lawmaking bodies with elected officials to handle local affairs. The final authority and power in the South, despite the lawmaking bodies, still belong to the King of England. So let's stop right there and let's talk about some things. So, first of all, we're going to identify as many pegs in this paragraph as we can. It's okay if you do not find all of them, just find the ones that we can. So, if I'm looking here, it says that women do not have any rights and they are the property of their husbands. So, is that political, economical, geographical, or social? So, because they're talking about our rights, some people would be compelled to say that it's political, but our rights actually give us social standing. Okay. So we would highlight this as a social attribute. It's a class system, right? If you do not own any land or property, you cannot vote. So, since this is specifically giving a qualification to our participation in government, what would it be? Political. Okay. If you are an African American or a Native American, you will be enslaved. So, is that political, economical, geographical, or social? So, I think that African Americans and Native Americans being enslaved is another class system, and class systems are social. Rich white males who owned property had the right to vote and hold a government position. So these are the qualifications for being able to have participation in the Southern government. So that would make it a political statement. The governor appointed by the king to rule the Southern colonies, but the governors did allow colonists to form colonial assemblies or lawmaking bodies with elected officials. So we can say that there's a government appointed by the king that's political. And the colonial assembly, the colonists formed colonial assemblies or lawmaking bodies with elected officials to handle the local affairs, is also political. The final authority belonged to the King of England, also political. Now let's look at what that looks like here. So we see we have, oh, look, I missed one. Southern colonies in North America. That's the geographical location. Women don't have any rights, social. Not owning property, you cannot vote, political. If you're an African American or Native American, you will be enslaved, social. And then all of the qualifications and rules to political participation are highlighted in yellow. Okay, so you're going to do this as well on this next section. Okay, so let's finish this next section together. It's this is the Virginia Company of London founded the first Southern colony when it sent about 100 men or boys to Virginia in 1607. There's a class system. We see that we have men who were allowed to come. The men named their settlement Jamestown in honor of King James. At first, they searched for gold. Let me go back and correct this. This was supposed to. Okay, my apologies. I had to go back and fix that. It was supposed to come in on a click. So this is the next part that we do. So we're going to do this part together. Okay, we're going to read it together. Then we're going to stop the video, and then I want you to take time and highlight what you need to highlight that identify the pegs in this section. Okay. So the Virginia Company of London founded the first Southern colony when it sent about 100 men and boys to Virginia in 1607. The men named their settlement Jamestown in honor of King James. At first, they searched for gold instead of planting crops or building homes. The area they settled was swampy, and within a year, most of the men had died from hunger and disease spread by mosquitoes. Finally, Captain John Smith took over leadership, and under his rule, those who did not work were left to starve. Gradually, the colony grew successful. In 1619, male landowners in Virginia elected the members of the House of Burgesses. This was the first elected representative government in North America. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment. I'm going to stop my video. You stop your video, and I want you to take a moment and highlight on your student forced copy the information that you need to highlight to identify the pegs in this section. Okay, So tell me, what did you find? You should have found the men and boys came to Virginia in 1607. The reason why we would underline this is because it is which pegs? Social. This is another class system. We see that they really only sent men and boys in the beginning of Jamestown. So that means families were broken up. So understand that dynamic. The men named their settlement Jamestown. They searched for gold instead of planting crops or building homes. So that means that a lot of them came there looking for gold. And gold would be which peg? Economics. Okay. The area they settled was swampy. And within a year, most of the men had died from hunger and diseases spread by mosquitoes. So they were swampy with mosquitoes. That would be geographical. Okay. And then some could argue that this you could underline this where Captain John Smith took over leadership and he implemented the do not work, do not eat, or do not work, starve policy. But then we know for certain that male landowners in Virginia elected the House of Burgesses, members of the House of Burgesses, as the first elected representative government in North America. We definitely know that this is what? Political. Very good. So now what you're going to do is you're going to finish the reading, highlighting the information that is that are the pegs in each one of the sections. So go ahead and stop the video. Take as much time as you need, but it should only take you about 10 minutes to complete the rest of this reading. And once you're done, we'll come back, we'll discuss it, and make sure you have the right things highlighted in your reading. Remember that even though you're working independently on your own, actually take time to process the information because you will have to take an assessment at the end. And we want to make sure that you do your best on the assessment and there are no do-overs on the assessment. So we want to make sure that you learn it now. Okay, so we'll clarify the misunderstandings. We learn from our mistakes, remember? And so if you make a mistake, it's perfectly fine. Just go back and correct it or add to your learning, your understanding before you move on and take your assessment, okay? So go ahead and pause the video. Take your time reading. If you need to look up vocabulary, please take time to go online and look up the words that you need to look up to have a better understanding. Or use a dictionary, keep a dictionary handy, and then come back and we will go over the reading together. Okay, so let's see what you come up with, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put up my highlights on here so we can see paragraph by paragraph what you should have gotten. And then you check your paper and see if it's the same thing. If not, go ahead and make those changes as necessary. Pause the video as you need to and go back and forth. So there are 4 colonies made up that made up the South. 4 other colonies other than Virginia made up the South. So Lord Baltimore, he's a key person. Founded Maryland as a safe haven for Catholics and for religious freedom. I will tell you that is something very important to know, that where each religious group were located will help you with many test questions because this falls under multiple teaks, okay? So Maryland, founded by Lord Baltimore, as a safe haven for Catholics for religious freedom. This means that they were being mistreated as Catholics in Britain. Okay, North and South Carolina started as a single colony in 1663 and stayed that way until the early 1700s. In 1732, King George II granted James Oglethorpe the land for the colony of Georgia. Oglethorpe settled it and built forts to protect the English from the Spaniards in Florida. James Oglethorpe controlled the colonists in Georgia for 20 years. Okay, so we have Oglethorpe is settling this area as a political, because he's the leader. And Maryland is coming there for religious freedom as social because it's religious freedom and religion is a social or a culture trait. Okay. I'm going to stop here for just a second and expound just a little bit on James Oglethorpe in Georgia. Georgia was a debtor's refuge, which means that in England, you go to prison for owing debt. So you can owe the government or owe someone $20, and then you will go to prison until you can pay it off. But what happens if you're in prison? Do you earn money in prison? No, you don't. So you have people being imprisoned um, because they owed money without a means to make money and pay off that debt. So I can be in jail for an extra long time for a small debt simply because I owed money. So James Oglethorpe says, okay, we'll go to Georgia and we'll settle this colony. And instead of locking these people up, send them there and they can work. So in the beginning, Georgia didn't have slaves because there were so many debtors there that owed money to pay off their debt. They had to work. So for many years, about 20 years, there were no slaves. It also served as a buffer between Spanish Florida. So right below here is Spanish Florida. It belongs to Spain at this time, and it'll belong to Spain until 1819. And with that, Georgia being a slave-free territory, it would ensure a couple of things. One, you had freemen here that could fight off the Seminoles and the other Native Americans that were coming from Florida, but also it served as a buffer of the slaves that may want to try and escape south from the other four southern states. So Georgia served as that buffer between Spanish Florida and the other southern slaveholding states. Okay. All right, so let's keep going. So the South's land was rich and it was growing season. And its growing season was long. Rivers kept the soil moist. Well, we know that rich land and long growing seasons and rich soil, rich moist soil are all geographical. It's letting us know what the land is like. And based on what the land is like, it will tell us what we can do with that land. What type of economic activities can we have? So we know that cash crops grew on large plantations. Virginia's main crop was tobacco, cash crop. We call these cash crops. It was tobacco. In the North Carolinas and Maryland raised corn and tobacco. Rice proved profitable in South Carolina and in Georgia. By the 1740s, South Carolina grew indigo, which was a plant used to make a dark blue dye. Planting, tending, and harvesting crops took many laborers, so the plantation owners started using indentured servants. These women, men and women, paid for their passage to the New World by working on the plantations for years. Okay. So we'll stop right there for just a second and talk about what's in the first and second paragraphs up here. All of this is the way we use this land. So now this is the geography and what the territory presented to us naturally, right? Long growing seasons, rich soil, moist soil. This is what we were able to do with that land, grow crops on it. And these were the types of crops that they were able to grow. They call them cash crops because they grew enough that they could sell and make money off of. And a lot of these, if you notice, they didn't ruin fast. So tobacco and rice, indigo, these don't ruin or spoil fast, right? So it's a way for us to harvest these crops and get a lot of money from them. Under the economic system that the colonists worked under, that we talked about on yesterday, the mercantilism system, many of these crops went right back to England. So they didn't sell them to whoever they wanted to, but it was a way for the colonies and the crown, the British crown, to make a lot of money. So this will be all economical. I know we would want to say sometimes that this is all geographical because it comes from the earth, but remember, it's what they're doing with this. This is the way they're making money. This is their way of life. So that's what separates this land use from this land characteristic. Okay. Geography versus economical. All right. So now here it says that they're using indentured servants. and that these men and women paid for their passage. So this is one form of labor that the South would use, and many colonies used, for people to come over. And they participated in what was called the head right system, where the people who paid for them to come, a plantation owner would pay for these indentured servants to come, they would receive about 50 acres or 50 baseball fields of land, and that land could be divvied out among those indentured servants as they began to earn their freedom, per se, when they paid off their debts. And so they could also get some land as well, and participate in the head right system. And that's how many people received a lot of land and became very wealthy during colonial times. But if we keep reading, it says that the plantation owners, but by the late 1600s, plantation owners started purchasing African slaves instead of using indentured servants. This means that we go from people who were volunteering to come to America to work, to have a better life, to pay off a debt just to stay here, to people who did not volunteer. These people were kidnapped. They were prisoners of war. They were stolen from their tribes and then brought across the seas against their will in very harsh conditions, and sold as property, to be used on these plantations, as slaves or free labor, in which they do not earn their freedom and they do not have any rights. So we have two different labor sources: indentured servants versus slaves that have been used in the colonies to cultivate the land. Okay, keeping going. And we notice that this is separate. So even though these are two different systems, this is a social system because these people came here. It's a class system, per se, just like we talked about the women and the men, right? Those are class systems. This indentured servant system, we will count this as social. You may also say that slaves were social. And if you did, I will not negate that, because it is a social class. But it is also economical. And it's okay if you identify it as both for now, but just know that the way they're using it. Okay. So here we're saying that plantation owners were using slaves instead of indentured servants. The slaves were used strictly for economical purposes. They had no rights, which means even though, yes, it's a slave, it's a social class. Slavery is a social class. They do not have rights. They never earned those rights as a slave, and they are used strictly for economics. If we can separate in our minds that we're talking about slaves as free labor and that that's economical versus slaves as a population of people that have no rights, then it's okay to see them interchangeably, but we need to know how we're identifying them and why we're identifying them as which one, right? As economical or social. But as slavery is both, it is an economic system and it is a social class within the American population. Okay, so let's be very cognizant, or aware of how we label them and when we label them. Then here we have Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia were home for many wealthy plantation owners. So if you highlighted this as geography, that is perfectly fine because it's the location, it's the actual colonies. Wealthy plantation owners, this green means it's economical. Yes, a plantation is a geographical element, right? It's a geography location that we can find a plantation, it's land. However, it is described in this sense as an economic thing, right? So it's a wealthy plantation owners. So because I own, I have property rights. I am a part of business. That's a business. So wealthy plantation owners, and that's economical. These owners used slave labor and indentured servants, all of which were free labor. So now see how here this is labeled in pink as social. It's a class system. But again, both of these are economical. So if you highlighted green or pink, it's okay. Just understand why you've highlighted that way and know that it can be used interchangeably. Okay. Just depending on how you're looking at it. So, slave labor, slaves and indentured servants are a class system, but looking at them as a labor source is economical. To harvest crops and manufacture goods could be sold for large profits. So this is addressing the class system, and this is addressing what they did economically. Okay, so that's how it's divided up. So it gives you a little freedom to move in there. Just understand why you're doing it. The greed of the plantation owners led to the growth of slavery. The growth of slavery led to the more plantations further and eventually west beyond the Appalachian Mountains. The wealthy obtained by cash the wealth obtained by cash crops caused Southerners to embrace the inhuman, cruel, wait on let's go away, institution of slavery, the misuse and abuse of African Americans, and the racism that resulted would eventually lead this country to a civil war. So that's a little preview or foreshadow as to where this unit will go, or this year will take us. We're going to study America from colonization, exploration, and colonization, and we're going to end at Reconstruction, which is the time immediately following the Civil War. So this is giving us a preview of where we're headed, and what the causes of that war are. So right here up front, what are the causes of the Civil War? What are going to be the causes? Yes, the institution of slavery. Whether you look at the institution of slavery as an economical issue, or if you look at it as a social issue. For the North, it was a social issue where people were being mistreated and it was inhumane, and they wanted them to be abolished. The abolitionists wanted slavery to be abolished. Or if you looked at it from a Southern perspective, as this is an economic source, it was a way of life, and it was a labor force that would completely disrupt their economy. Either way you look at it, they had opposing views, and it would eventually lead to the Civil War. But there was lots of wealth obtained by the free labor of cash of slaves growing and cultivating the land for cash crops. Okay, so we can see here that this is economical. They're harvesting crops. The growth of slavery led to more plantations. Um, this is very important to understand. One of our TEACs specifically addresses this, that you need to understand that because the geography allowed for large scale planting and cash crops, it led to the need for lots of labor. Lots of labor led to the need of having slaves. And so the plantation system um, develops a need and the growth of slavery in Southern America. Okay. So this is very important for us to keep on the forefront of our brains as we go throughout the year. Watch how slavery evolves throughout the year. Okay. So this is a social issue, but it is also an economical issue, right? Social and economical. So the South is riddled by a particular characteristic that we're not going to find as much in the other colonies. Not to say that it doesn't exist at all, but it doesn't exist like it does in the Southern colonies. And what is that particular attribute? Slavery. And what causes the need for slavery? Large scale farming and the need for lots of labor. Okay, very good. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take a moment and you're going to um, analyze the visuals that we see in this picture. We'll do one of them together. We can do this top one up here together. I provided you with a STEM question to help you navigate the visual. You're going to navigate the visual. You're going to analyze the visual. What is it that you see? Name it. Identify it as a peg. Is it political, economical, geographical, or social? And then describe it in your own words. Okay. So if you circle it and you say it's economical, I want you to write it as an economical statement. Okay. So for instance, what do you see in this top picture? It says, I see blank. I infer that this is the blank region because blank. So I want you to identify what peg it, what's happening, what region it's in, and what peg it is. Okay. So what do you see here? I see slaves picking crops. Looks like it could be tobacco. Picking crops in a field. I infer that this is the southern region because of the crops, the vast amount of crops that I see, and the African slaves being used to harvest the crops. This is political, economical, geographical, or social. So we would say that this is economical because here we can see the labor force and the work being done. Okay, so we would circle economical and then we would write that statement out. I see slaves cultivating crops, infer that this is the southern region because blah, 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 right? So that's what you would write here. So now I want you to take time and look at the second, third, and fourth pictures and differentiate between them and identify what pegs it is. Be very careful when doing so because remember, political, economical, and geographical look very similar because they feed off of one another, but so do social and political. Social classes and political both involve people. However, social classes, um, all social classes are not involved in politics of Southern colonies. So remember that as you look at your visuals. Go ahead and pause your video. Take about 5 minutes to finish the last three visuals, and then come back so that we can check it together before you move on to your assessment. Okay, so wasn't that fun? We took what we were learning throughout the lesson, the reading, and now we're making it come alive with the visual so we can actually see it and imagine what it looked like. Okay, so in this second picture over here, what is it that you see? So let me ask you first of all, what is it that you don't see? I didn't understand that. Sorry, that was my watch. What is it that you don't see here? Do you see women? I know we see a lot of wigs, but those aren't women. Do you see African Americans? Do you see Native Americans? So who do you see? You see white men. And do these white men, do they look rich? Do they look poor? Do they look wealthy? So you probably said they look wealthy, right? They look rich. Why do they look rich? What tells you that they are rich? The clothes that they're wearing. Very nice, well tailored, nice material, vibrant colors, indigo. Um, and so those colors and the material that they're wearing lets you know that they have money. So we know that where there are white men who are wealthy, they probably own land, and they're all gathered together. Is that political, economical, geographical, or social? You should definitely have said political. Okay. And then let's look down here in this picture right here. What do you see? You see lots of men with their top hats. Do they look rich or poor? Look pretty wealthy. Okay. And so what about down here? Who are these? Who are they? These are African Americans or Africans, right? So possibly, right, possibly slaves. So we have a slave population and we have a rich white male population. So would this be political, economical, geographical, or social? Exactly. You should have said social because we can see different class systems within this picture. Okay. And then lastly, over here, we have a vast amount of land. We can tell that it is very rich soil, very green, lots of crops. We can see back here in the horizon geographical features. So, of course, we would say that this is geography. Okay. So go back and check what you did. This should have been placed inside of your Google Classroom slide, answering each one of these visuals. So teacher side note, you would simply place each one of these visuals as a question inside of your Google Classroom and have them respond to it by giving you a statement and telling you that it's political, economical, geographical, or social in that Google form. Okay, so now the DOL. You have 10 minutes to complete the DOL. The DOL is loaded in All in Learning. And so the students will be able to click on the DOL. So you would give them the link or tell them to log into All in Learning. And then they would take the DOL in All in Learning. You should set your preferences to it being where they cannot click in and out. That will kind of prevent them from being able to go online and look things up. And they would have to take it as is. It does not prevent 100% cheating. However, it does give some safeguards. And you'll at least know if they have to request to get back in that they clicked in and out, and there's a possibility that their data is skewed, right? But it will be in All in Learning. The assessment is loaded in All in Learning now, so you can go to it and see that it's there, or you can have them do it as a class. So you can look for it. It's going to say Southern Colonies DOL 2021. And so you can look for it in All in Learning, or you can simply have each campus put it in and keep your data local in your campuses. Okay. I hope this helps you to see how you can very easily take this lesson and flip it into a student-friendly lesson by making student-forced copies of the readings, even or of the PowerPoints, allowing the students to have a pre-recorded lesson, giving wait times and telling them where to pause the videos, and giving the instructional pieces the same way you would in the classroom. Notice I spoke very paced. I had a varied pace. I inflected. I continued to remain engaged. I stopped and asked questions, gave a little bit of time in order for the students to be able to process the question, even if they're not answering it to a person. It still gives them time to think because our brains automatically think when we're given a question. And then putting it in the Google Classroom as a Google form, and every question that you want the students to answer, you can have them answer. I have a sample of how to take this lesson and put it in a Google Classroom Google form that I will be providing with this video so that you can see how this all works together. Okay, you can also take this DOL if you want to continue it and just put it in the Google Classroom. That is up to the campus. But I think that data is collected better in All in Learning. Okay. Please let me know if you need anything. My name is Sabrina Richardson. I am the Social Studies ILC for Dallas Independent School District Secondary.